Hello guys! In this video, we will explain all properties of the Outbound Agent REST Adapter with example. Introduction. This diagram shows what the adapter is. The adapter core is the central communication component between Salesforce and external systems. It acts like a translator and connector that helps both systems exchange data securely and correctly. First, on the left side, you can see Salesforce. This is where requests or data originate or where responses are sent back. Salesforce processes data through objects, records, Apex processes, flows, triggers, and validations. It connects to the adapter using the Salesforce API REST. Next, in the center, we have the agent, adapter core. The agent acts as a translator and communication bridge that enables secure and reliable data exchange between Salesforce and external REST API providers. It handles protocol communication, data formatting and parsing, authentication and security, like token or OAuth 2.0 based authentication, error handling and logging, as well as routing and transformation. The agent core does not contain business logic. Its main purpose is to manage communication and data exchange. Finally, on the right side, the adapter connects to external systems and API providers. These include third-party SaaS REST APIs, such as Shopify or Google APIs, modern ERP systems, cloud services via REST, secured partner APIs, microservices and webhooks, and internal corporate APIs. These external systems send and receive data or requests in any format via REST. This diagram shows the SKYVVA Agent REST Adapter configuration and processing flow. It explains how Salesforce connects with external REST APIs securely, sends data, and processes responses in real time or asynchronously. Step 1 is the information section. Here we define the basic setup of the adapter, like name, direction, status, type, and description. This section defines the identity and basic configuration of the Agent REST Adapter. Step 2 is the Properties section. This is the main configuration area where we define how the adapter connects and communicates with external systems. We have different properties here for authentication type, used to secure the connection like basic, OAuth 2.0, API key, JWT, or certificate. For header, used to pass additional HTTP information like authorization or content type. For operation, define the action like post, get, put, patch, or delete. For token endpoint URL, used in OAuth 2.0 to generate access tokens. For API service endpoint URL, main external REST API URL. For path parameter, dynamic values inside the URL. For query parameters, filters or extra parameters in URL. For request format, defines data format we send like JSON or XML. For response format, defines expected response format. For Salesforce ID handling, how Salesforce ID is passed. For timeout, maximum waiting time for response. For run location, where it executes, Salesforce or agent. For processing mode, how the adapter processes data push or polling mode. Step 3 is the Advanced Properties section. Here we handle advanced configurations like auto-generated connection URI, connection settings like SSL, proxy, host, and port, timeout configuration, custom processing class for custom logic, connection destination for external systems. This section is mainly for advanced control and fine-tuning of the connection. Step 4 is the Test and Save button section. Here we can validate the configuration for ping connection use for test API connectivity. For test connection use for validate full request and response. After testing, we can either save or cancel the configuration. Step 5 is the How It Works section. This section provides a high-level overview of how the Agent REST Adapter communicates between Salesforce and an external REST API. Step 6 is the Flow Processing section. This section visualizes the actual data flow from start to finish. This shows how data moves step by step between systems. Finally, Step 7 is the Key Benefits section. This section highlights the main advantages of using the SKYVVA Agent REST Adapter, including secure communication through multiple authentication methods, support for both JSON and XML data formats, real-time and asynchronous processing capabilities, seamless integration with cloud and on-premise systems, and a highly flexible and configurable architecture that can be adapted to different business and integration requirements. Now we are on the Agent Control Board screen. Click on the Adapter tab. Click the New button. This screen is used to create an adapter in SKYVVA. This screen is divided into two main sections, Information and Properties. Here, you can see the Information Adapter section. This section contains the adapter information. Now let's start. The first field is Name. In this field, we need to set a unique name for the adapter. You can set the name based on your requirements. In this example, we entered the name Agent REST Adapter. For the next field is Direction. This field defines the flow direction of the adapter. In this video, we focus on the Outbound adapter, so the default screen selected is Outbound. When we choose Outbound, it means that Salesforce or SKYVVA needs to send data to an external system. In this scenario, SKYVVA acts as the sender, while the external application acts as the receiver. The next field is Status. For this field, we have two options, Active and Inactive. When we select Active, it means the adapter is enabled. When we select Inactive, it means the adapter is disabled. The next field is Type. For the Type field, we support many types of adapters, such as Agent File, Agent Database, Agent REST, and more. However, in this video, we are focusing on Agent REST Adapter, so we choose Agent REST Adapter. The next field is Description. This field is used for optional notes about the adapter. Now, let's look at the Properties Adapter section. The first property of the adapter is Authentication Type. The Authentication Type field defines how SKYVVA authenticates with the target REST API before sending or receiving data. You can see that the picklist supports 5 options. For Basic, we use basic authentication when the target API requires a username and password for authentication. SKYVVA sends the username and password in the HTTP authorization header with every request. For example, when we select Basic Authentication, the adapter displays the username and password fields. These credentials are used to authenticate with the target API before sending the request. You can enter the username and password obtained from your local API. For example, we enter the username and password obtained from Customer 24 Online to authenticate the connection with the API. Here you can see the username and password on the Customer 24 Online. It depends on the API you are using. For OAuth 2.0, we use OAuth 2.0 when the target API requires an access token instead of a username and password. Before calling the API, SKYVVA first requests an access token from the authorization server and then uses that token in subsequent API calls. For example, when we select OAuth 2.0 authentication, the adapter displays the OAuth 2.0 flow field. The OAuth 2.0 flow field defines how SKYVVA obtains an access token before calling the target REST API. As you can see, the available authentication types in the picklist are username, password, credential, client credential, and refresh token. For the username, password, credential authentication type, we use this option when the API requires a username and password to obtain an access token. As you can see, the adapter displays the username, password, OAuth 2.0 client ID, and OAuth 2.0 client secret fields. We have already explained the username and password fields. For the OAuth 2.0 client ID and OAuth 2.0 client secret, you can obtain these values from the API provider or the system you are integrating with. In this example, you can see the OAuth 2.0 client ID and OAuth 2.0 client secret provided by Customer 24 Online, which we are using for this integration. For the client credential authentication type, we use this option when the integration is performed between systems and no user login is required. SKYVVA uses the client ID and client secret to obtain an access token before calling the API. You can also see that it displays the OAuth 2.0 client ID and OAuth 2.0 client secret fields, which we have already explained. The last option is refresh token. We choose this option when the API provider supports token renewal. Instead of requesting a completely new authorization, SKYVVA uses the refresh token to automatically obtain a new access token when the current token expires. You can see the OAuth 2.0 client ID and OAuth 2.0 client secret, which we have already explained. You can also see the OAuth 2.0 access token and OAuth 2.0 refresh token that we obtained from customer 24 online. Here, you can view the access token and refresh token, which you can get from the API you are using. Now back to the authentication type fields. For API key, we use API key authentication when the target API requires a unique API key to identify and authorize the application. The API key is usually sent in a header. When we choose API key, you can see that the adapter displays the API key name, API key value, and API key add to fields. For API key name, this field defines the name of the API key parameter. It depends on the API you are using. For API key value, this is where you enter the actual API key value provided by your API service. This key is used to authenticate your request. For API key add to, this is where you enter the actual API key value provided by your API service. This key is used to authenticate your request. You can see there are two options. By default, the value is set to header, which means the API key is sent in the request header. The other option is query params, where the API key is sent as a query parameter depending on the API system you are using. For JWT, we use JWT authentication when the target API requires a JSON Web Token (JWT) for secure authentication. The JWT contains encoded information about the user or application and is digitally signed. When we choose the JWT authentication type, the adapter displays the username and password fields. The username and password in the JWT option are provided by the API provider or the external system you are integrating with, not by SKYVVA itself. For certificate, we use certificate authentication when the target system requires a client certificate to verify the identity of the calling application. This provides a higher level of security than usernames or API keys. When we choose certificate authentication, the adapter displays four main fields. First is certificate format, which defines the type of certificate file, such as P12 or JKS. Next is the folder directory, which is the location where the certificate file is stored. Then we have the trust store file, which contains trusted certificates used to verify the connection is secure. And finally, the trust store password, which is used to access and protect the trust store file. Now we have explained all the authentication type options. You can choose the one that best fits your API's requirements and what the API supports. In this example, we choose OAuth 2.0. Authentication type. For the OAuth 2.0 flow, we choose client credentials. Now we enter the OAuth 2.0 client ID and client secret, which we obtained from customer 24 online. The next property is header. The header property specifies the HTTP headers that the Agent REST Adapter includes when sending requests to an external REST service. Headers provide additional metadata required by the target API, such as authentication credentials, content types, accepted response formats, and custom values. The agent automatically adds these headers to every outbound request during execution. The next property is operation. The operation property determines which HTTP method the Agent REST Adapter uses when invoking the external REST API. The selected operation controls how the agent interacts with the target resource. You can see in the pick list that the Agent REST Adapter supports 5 operations. Post, used to create a resource. Patch, used to update selected fields of an existing resource. Put, used to replace an existing resource. Get, used to retrieve information. Delete, used to remove a resource. Select post. The next property is token endpoint URL. The token endpoint URL specifies the OAuth token service used by the Agent REST Adapter to obtain an access token before calling the external REST API. When OAuth authentication is configured, the agent first requests a token and then uses the returned access token in subsequent API calls. Now, Enter the token endpoint URL obtained from customer 24 online. You can retrieve this URL from your API configuration. The next property is API Service Endpoint URL. The API Service Endpoint URL defines the target REST service that the Agent REST Adapter invokes. It represents the base URL of the external API and serves as the destination for all requests initiated by the agent. Now, enter the API Service Endpoint URL obtained from customer 24 online. The next property is URL Path Parameter. The URL Path Parameter property allows the Agent REST Adapter to append dynamic values to the endpoint path. Path parameters are commonly used to identify a specific resource within the external system. The next property is URL Query Parameter. The URL Query Parameter property allows the Agent REST Adapter to add parameters after the character in the URL. Query parameters are typically used for filtering, searching, sorting, or pagination. The next property is Request Format. The Request Format property specifies how the Agent REST Adapter serializes the request payload before sending it to the external REST service. The payload format must match the format expected by the target API. It supports two options, XML format and JSON format. You can choose the format based on your configuration. In this example, we use the JSON format. The next property is Response Format. The Response Format property specifies the expected response format returned by the external REST service. The Agent REST Adapter uses this setting to parse the response and make the data available for subsequent agent processing and mapping. It supports two options, XML format and JSON format. In this example, we use the JSON format. The next property is XML root tag namespace. The XML root tag namespace property defines the namespace associated with the XML root element. When XML is used as the request or response format, the Agent REST Adapter applies the namespace to ensure the XML structure complies with the schema expected by the external system. The next property is XML root tag. The XML root tag property specifies the root element name used by the Agent REST Adapter when generating XML payloads. The root tag acts as the parent node that contains all other XML elements. The next property is Salesforce ID handling. The Salesforce ID handling property controls how Salesforce record IDs are managed by the Agent REST Adapter during request and response processing. This setting determines whether IDs are preserved, ignored, or handled according to integration requirements. You can see that the default value displayed on the screen is none. When this option is selected, the Agent REST Adapter does not add Salesforce record IDs to the response. The response contains only the data returned by the external API or the standard processing result. Another option is Return Salesforce ID into the response. When this option is selected, the Agent REST Adapter includes the Salesforce record ID in the response payload after processing. This allows the calling system to store or reference the Salesforce record for future transactions. The next property is Timeout. The Timeout property specifies the maximum time, in milliseconds, that the Agent REST Adapter waits for a response from the external REST service before terminating the request. If the response is not received within the configured time, the request fails with a timeout error. The next property is Specify the location to run the interface. The Specify the location to run the interface property determines where the agent interface execution takes place. This controls which runtime environment processes the request. You can see that it supports two options, Salesforce. The interface runs within the Salesforce environment, where all processing and mappings are performed directly in Salesforce. Agent. The interface runs on the agent runtime, which handles the processing and returns the result to Salesforce. This option is useful for offloading processing from Salesforce and handling high-volume integrations. The next property is Processing Mode. The Processing Mode property determines how the Agent REST Adapter exchanges data with external systems. We support two options. When pushing is selected, SKYVVA queries the data, executes the mapping, and prepares the complete message before sending it to the agent. The agent receives all required data in one event and then dispatches it to the target system, REST API, database, file, etc. When polling is selected, SKYVVA sends only a notification, such as record IDs or a SOQL-based trigger. The agent calls SKYVVA to retrieve and process the actual data. Once the agent has the complete data, it dispatches it to the target system, REST API, database, file, etc. The next property is Custom Processing Class. This property allows developers to specify a custom Java processing class for advanced logic. You can create your own custom class to transform data, add validation, customize processing logic, and handle special business requirements. The next property is Connection Destination. This property defines the target connection destination used by the adapter. It specifies which destination system, which configured connection, where the data should go. This field is important because without a valid destination, the adapter does not know where to send data. In this example, we select the existing connection. Next, we explain about all buttons on this screen. Here you can see the Cancel button. The Cancel button is used to close the adapter configuration window without saving any changes. The next button is Save button. The Save button is used to store and apply the adapter configuration. The next button is Ping Connection button. The Ping Connection button is used to quickly verify whether the target server is reachable. After we configure all properties and make sure everything is correct, click Ping Connection to verify the connection. If the adapter configuration is correct, it will show Adapter Ping Successful.
See?
It means this adapter configuration is correct, and we can use it based on the requirements. Now we have explained all properties and buttons of the Outbound Agent REST Adapter. The Agent REST Adapter is a SKYVVA integration adapter that enables Salesforce to communicate with external systems through REST APIs using the SKYVVA agent. Instead of connecting Salesforce directly to an external system, the agent acts as a bridge between Salesforce and the target application. The Agent REST Adapter can send data from Salesforce to external systems and also retrieve data from external systems through REST services. The Agent REST Adapter is a powerful integration component that enables secure, flexible, and real-time communication between Salesforce and external REST services. It helps organizations connect cloud and on-premise systems, supports multiple authentication methods, reduces Salesforce processing load, and provides a secure way to integrate with internal applications through the SKYVVA agent.
Summary.
The SKYVVA Agent REST Adapter is a powerful integration solution that enables Salesforce to securely communicate with external REST APIs and on-premise systems. It acts as a bridge between Salesforce and external applications, providing flexible authentication options, real-time data exchange, support for push and polling scenarios, and advanced customization through custom processing classes. By using the Agent REST Adapter, organizations can build secure, scalable, and efficient integrations while reducing complexity and maintaining full control over their business processes. Thanks for visiting our YouTube channel. See you in the next video.